So this week on Competent Conquest, I am Ben, but I'm not playing this game. This is between Bryan and Karl. Bryan is Círdan, playing the Dweghom list that he just won LVO with, against Karl playing his second place Under Spires list. I started recording a little bit late here. Bryan's going to bring in his one light, and Karl is probably bringing in a bunch. Looks like he got all of them. 2 Strix, 2 Force-Grown Drones, and 2 characters. Bryan's going to move up here. He's just trying to get erupting on multiple zones. The mission is Maelstrom, so because he has Herald of Magma, he's able to turn on terrain pieces that he touches with the erupting special rule, which allows him to cast his Magma spells from his Hellbringer Drakes onto zones. Now, Karl knows this matchup pretty well. These two have played it a lot, and he knows that Force-Grown block is very, very hard to deal with. Due to the High Clone Executor's Disperse ability, they gain Loose Formation, being really, really hard to remove any sort of models from. And that just makes it a very difficult situation or it's just a very difficult unit to move off of that center zone. So Karl really wants to take the center zone on 2 and really gain control of the board. In Maelstrom, the center zone is worth 2 points on turns 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then it swaps, where it's worth 1 point, and the outer zones are worth more, and then it swaps back. But if turns 2, 3, and 4, you can score the center zone, you gain a pretty big edge in Maelstrom as far as the victory points go. And that's really Karl's goal here. Angling the Strix like this, the big value of this play is if he were to charge in, if like Bryan brought something on that charged the Strix, then these guys would be able to charge over here and just be in a better position. That's not really likely to happen here, but it's one of the general things about angling regiments that's pretty valuable. We're going to reserve rolls. Karl's going to bring in his Pheromancer and Brute Drones, and then bring in 2 more mediums. Bryan is going to bring in his Initiates with flank, and then usually he brings Hellbringer Drake, and then he got 2 other mediums. So measuring out Strix threat ranges here. Definitely wants to get some shots on, but doesn't really want Strix engaging things that he wants, to be effective in the game. Estimation here is that what he wants to do is get his hold Ballistae into that forest so that he can cast Magma Blasts, Pyroclasts, into one of the Strix units and just try to get them off the table. Failing that, being able to seep and get the other one would be helpful if he can lure a Strix in. Karl's pretty well castled up. Usually the plan is get Tenacious and reroll 6s on Resolve on the big Force-Grown block, and then activate them near the end of the turn, so that anything that happens to them really kind of didn't happen to them because of Regen and Tenacious and High Resolve. They're just... You just don't lose nearly as many as come back. So imagine they're building their stacks right now. Bryan's considering, it looks a lot like Bryan's considering placement of where his Hellbringers are going to go in order to be able to shoot things that he wants to shoot. It's interesting here because they're not very effective against the large Force-Grown block. So Karl can use that block to zone Hellbringer Drakes and just keep them out of places where, well, frankly, Karl doesn't want them to be, as well as using it to protect the large Marksman clone block. The Marksman clones definitely want to be on that hill, which is kind of why you see Karl placed the way he is. It means that they're more easily able to avoid any sort of line of sight difficulties, and they don't have to use arcane fire in order to get their shots, and +1 to his, +1 to hit. So Karl's gonna go with High Clone first. He spoiled that. Bryan's gonna bring on the Initiates. There's only really like one place they can go, which is probably up on this hill. I don't know if there's really good answers for them into this matchup. Like, they fight the Forest Groans head on, but it's not fun for them. Yeah, so Hellbringer's going to go up on the left here. It threatens that zone pretty well and is far from the Forest Grown block, and I think that's a good play. Generally speaking, I would probably be planning on putting both Hellbringers in a similar place. I would try to keep them both kind of together and be able to dump damage on. But we'll see what ends up happening here. So Pheromancer goes on Brute Drones, or on Force Grown Drones, sorry, and likely is Siphoning Strength, just so that nothing exciting happens to them. Yeah, so second Hellbringer is coming up. This is actually something Bryan and I have talked about a bunch as he's played this army, is that he tends to like to split his Hellbringers, and when he doesn't, he has more success. And again, against me, he did beat me. If you were keeping up, he beat me in the finals of LVO. Yeah, so this is, I like this play. I think it's very strong to keep the two Hellbringers together. The real way to win Maelstrom is to control 2/3 of the board. So if he can be very strong and own that far left point, then it comes down to a battle over the center point. And it's a tough battle, but it's a battle that I think actually works pretty well for Dweghom. So I don't love that placement. I think that Hellbringer needs to be more in the game than it is. I would have gone further up on the left side. Both Strix are already committed. They're not really in a threatening place. I liked to the side of the Initiates on the left over there a little bit more. I want it to be further up the table. So let's see. So he's moving the Ballistae. Not sure exactly why he's wheeling here. Like, I suppose he's trying to avoid being flanked by Strix. Oh, he has enough movement to get into the terrain, and that's all that he really cared about. I didn't think that wheel was going to let him get there, so he protects his flank from the Strix on the left side. He would have been fine from the Strix on the right either way, but protecting his flank is helpful there as long as he's still able to get into the zone, which he was. I wouldn't have guessed that by the placement, but I wasn't measuring it, so. So we know that Karl's going to be putting those Marksman clone on this big hill, right? So we know that that side of the board is a very dangerous place to be. I mean, he could put them elsewhere, but there's really no safe place, right? That's the only place that is protected by his Force Groans and gives advantage to the Marksman clones. So Bryan activates a Tempered Sorcerer here, and I'm sure that this is a Magma, a Pyroclast going into Strix. And the Strix fail all 5, as they are likely to do. They did pretty well in Resolve, so they still break from that, and will likely die to the other Pyroclast. Presumably that wasn't the Warlord. Oh, that was the Warlord. So he likely just cast a Seep and was like, I don't care about the Seep, because it's not going to be in a place where it does anything. So Karl goes, he unbreaks the Strix, so that they can regen, but Bryan's next card is stacked for a Tempered Sorcerer, and he's learned this. Regen's good. Underspires are powerful. You gotta stack that stuff together and really make sure that you can get those guys off the board. And he did, and that's obviously the goal. So now these Strix are stuck, and they have to charge Ballistae, maybe? I don't know. They're over there by themselves. At least they no longer have to worry about getting blasted, like pyroclasted this turn, but the Hellbringer on the left could certainly double march up and then seep, and then you'd be fine. This is another reason why I would have liked the Warlord placement to be a little bit more mobile. The Warlord's able to do seep pyro and allow the other one to pyro off of it. So you actually do want the Warlord to be like placed a little bit more aggressively. And because he's only playing against brute drones, he knows that there's basically only brute drones left. The marksman clones can't really afford to go on this far left flank. If they do, you can just hang back the Hellbringers and be fine with it. Or honestly, just eat a round of shooting and kind of run at them. They're not going to kill you, and they will take a ton of damage from those pyros. They get no saves. Their resolve's not very good. Seep, Pyro picks up a lot of marksman clones. So they really have to be protected. Oh, that's unfortunate. So Karl was unable to get into the zone with his Force-Grown drones here. I think when he activated the Strix card, he didn't do anything with them, and I would have double marched them sideways into the terrain. Getting them cover and making it easier for the High Clone Executor to get into the zone. You really want him in that zone. You want to start the scoring as soon as possible. It's not a huge mistake, but against Dweghom, they have the ability to table you, and they're probably going to win by doing so, especially Tempered. They generate, like, their tokens are extra wounds, they're just generally tanky, they have good attacks. That whole kind of design and mechanic of the faction means that they're an army you really want to get ahead of early. This is something we discovered recently, is that we can size up the cards to make them a lot more readable on camera. So we're still learning. Also, I think I learned it for the last video, but I realized that there is, in fact, a button to hide all of the stuff on Tabletop Simulator, so you can only see the board and not, like, where the measuring tools are and all the things that I'm not using on my camera account. So, you know, I'm not very good at YouTube. Sorry about that. I'm reasonably good at Conquest, though. So I hope to help everybody else get at least competent. So now they're really trying to figure out... talking to both of them play this matchup a lot of times. And really the thing about Under Spires is there's a lot of scary stuff on the table from Under Spires. The marksman clones are what kill you. If you can clear them and not just get bogged down by brute drones. The brute drones will grind you out. Like, the regen's really good, but they're killable, right? And marksman clones are very killable. But if marksman clones can just sit there and shoot you because the walls of brute drones and force-grown drones are in the way, they become very, very, very punishing. It's just a lot of free damage coming from not that expensive of a unit, and you're paying for only offense on it. So it does its job well. The Onslaught drones in this list are, they're very good. I generally use them. I generally bring them on turn 4, like it's happening now, and then burn out them to run them up the side of the board. So they end up going like 10 on and then like 14 on the next, 14 up the next turn. And then like regen and start turning inward after they're on a point in a scenario like this. And then I guess that's kind of their whole job. So one of the things about this matchup that you'll notice is that priority hasn't mattered. Like, winning Supremacy has been a not very relevant game effect. Well, that was an interesting play there. He double marched sideways with his Ballistae. I probably would have just charged the Forest-Grown drones. It buys you space. Like, sure, can he kill the Ballistae? Yes, they will die. But he'll take some Aura of Death. You'll get a lot of space for your Initiates to move up the board. The Strix could flank charge you, but then you just march charge the Strix with your Initiates and get into the zone, or a lot of other things. Maybe he would clash without inspiring. Like, you probably die to the Aura of Death on the following turn, but if you're still alive on the following turn, then you held that Forest-Grown block back for a whole turn, giving you a lot of space in order to, like, develop your left side of the board here as Dweghom. So I like the Ballista as the first activation there, but I think in this case I would have used them. I would have just sacrificed them by throwing them into the Forest-Grown drones. They don't likely die very quickly. That also puts, and then they still are able to, like, use their Magma arcs. And it pressures the Strix to try to clear them off. They are unlikely to die to the Strix charge, and they will have already activated, so they don't take Aura of Death this turn, which means they either have to die to a Clash from the Forest-Grown drones, which eats a Pheromancy for it to be always inspired, or it probably doesn't kill them, or a turn of shooting from the Marksman clones, which you don't want that to happen. So Pheromancer used Synaptic Coordination there to look at Bryan's top card, and then instead of activating the Pheromancer, he chose to just activate Brute Drones to run him up, because he wanted to save his Pheromancer activation. This Hellbringer's coming up. He's on the hill. Like, I do understand the logic behind this placement, right? Like, putting it behind the Initiates is a good bunker for it and protects it. I recognize... So, in my opinion, winning this game comes down to stalling until you can kill the Marksman clones. Or at least stalling until you can get something into the Marksman clones to keep them from ripping your army apart. If you can do that, then you can go into and successfully kill the Forest-Growns. Otherwise, you can't really successfully kill the Forest-Growns. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. So he buffs up his Marksmans here. Generally speaking, it's Tenacious and Reroll Resolves. Some of the time, or it's +1 attack and Dread. In this case, they're clearly not getting charged, so he's just trying to be like, look, you really don't want to shoot these guys. Protect them from any sort of output that would go into them. Make sure they're still at full strength so that they don't get, well, beat up, basically. So here he's going to set up Seep, and then he's going to Pyro, and Strix are already down a stand, so this could be a really good way to finish them off. So Strix have 5 saves here. They make 2, so they're not going to die. So they take 5, but it does break them. Interesting thing of note, so Strix don't have a command stand, so you can actually remove them however you want. And Karl did that here. So the closest stand... So he just goes with a Reform and just marches into the zone. They're doing... So the Tabletop Simulator mod has some issues with forests, so they're kind of doing this thing where we draw the outline of them. There's just a couple of points in them. I don't know if it's rocks or trees. So generally they're set up not to clip, and I know that the person who's in charge of the mod is working to fix it. but there are a couple of points in some of these forests where they do clip, and it makes your stands kind of just flip and fly all over the board, as you may have seen in previous videos. Which, well, hilarious isn't necessarily the best. Okay, so Bryan just moves his Hellbringer up into the zone here, and then he wheels a little bit. And I don't know if he keeps going. He doesn't. Okay, so this makes sense, right? Because there's still 2 units of Brute Drones to come on, and he doesn't want to overcommit them right now. Overcommit this Hellbringer right now. This is yet another example of why I like double Hellbringer over here. If you have double Hellbringer further on the left, you're able to be much more aggressive with that. If you're much more aggressive with that, you threaten the Marksman clones. March charging Marksman clones with a Hellbringer Drake is a good trade. You get in there, and then you blast them with your Wizard, and they almost certain, like, they're not going to love that. The next turn, you'll be able to blast them with your Wizard and likely just start shooting the back lines of the Spires army. If you can create that situation, you just gain such huge value, and it really like gives you breathing room to play into this Under Spires list. I'm going to play a similar list in Captain Con this weekend, because all of the lists that you see on this channel are things that we as a group have worked on. Bryan has, like, somewhat famously said that, like, the double Magma Drake was my innovation, I guess, but, like, it's not unique to me. Just when we were talking about Dweg lists after the most recent update, or after the change where Magma happened, where Magma got updated, I was like, I really like Magma Drakes, because Pyroclast is really good, it's likely to resolve with 6 dice, and you're not as likely to get as many hits, and it's low resources, and double Drakes are just really useful. So, but then, like, the Initiates block, well, I like it, Bryan came up with that, right? Like, I didn't come up with that. So, like, we've talked about it. Everything's been discussed, but the double Magma Drake was like something I said is really good, and then Bryan turned it into a good list. And I think that's, so everything on here is like that. The initial, this Underspires list is my initial list. I had a 6 block of Onslaught drones instead of the like MSU Forest Drones with the Pheromancer. And we kind of learned from that the 6 block with Degenerative Aura wasn't worth it. So we split it into 2 Onslaughts. And then we were like, well, we want a second unit of Force-Grown Drones in the army for Pheromancies. So then we did that. And then, and then it was pretty much where we stopped working on it together. And then after playing a bunch of games, Karl, like, dropped the second unit of Onslaught drones that we had for a second unit of Strix, which we had talked about initially, and I said is probably right, but I'm not going to build more Strix. But after having played against it, it's definitely right. Like, it's worth building the Strix. So the marksmen go up, and they just put a bunch of shots into Initiates here. Initiates are what you want getting shot, because, you know, like, you got a lot of wounds, and if you can make the marksman move and shoot you, that's a good place to be. So this placement is really interesting to me. I'm going to go back to talking about that Hellbringer placement again. So imagine both these Hellbringers are 14 inches up along this left side. Or are, like, all the way up, right? Those Brute Drones go there to cover, but those Hellbringers can just, you know, run up that flank. And more importantly, that Warlord Hellbringer is able to get up further and probably seep double pyro those marksman clones. And that creates a situation where you have this Ironclad Drake that is all of a sudden significantly harder to deal with. So technically that move, with the reform, your center has to stay in the same place. So technically what Karl has to do here is reform to change facing and then march backwards in order to be there. He did march backwards a little bit. I'm actually not sure he can be at exactly that angle, but it's not a huge deal. So the turn ends. Karl scores 3. Bryan scores 1. I don't think there would have been a lot of good options for Karl, a lot of good plays for Karl to make into those Ballistae. And I think those Ballistae might actually still be there or would have gotten shot down by marksman clones instead of having a couple of wounds on initiates. And Karl wouldn't be in the zone. So I really think that the Ballista charging up to hold Karl off would have actually provided more tempo than those Ballista are going to do. Frankly, like, they're really good against a lot of armies, but against this much regen 4, they're not doing anything. I'm not sure if he's within 8 inches of marksman clones right now. I believe all of his models are touching the forest. So activating Ballista first and just like take aiming into marksman clones is likely his best play, because kind of nothing else matters. I actually would likely make... I would probably just shoot marksman clones and charge force-grown drones. Yeah, I would shoot marksman clones and charge force-grown drones with the militia, with my hold Ballista, if they're my first activation right here. I would really be focusing basically all my efforts on getting rid of those marksmen. Because those marksmen right now are a huge threat to this Hellbringer. Right now they're trying to see if the Hellbringer can engage 3 stands, which is the maximum number of stands, without clipping the terrain, and also leaving the correct amount of space for the hold Raegh and initiates to get in. And no, I'm pretty sure is the answer to that. I don't know if they agreed on the drawing is slightly larger than the actual footprint of the forest, and unfortunately I wasn't watching during this part of the live game because I had to go take care of my dog. So I'm not 100% certain if they agreed upon that. I don't think it's highly relevant. If I'm being honest, I probably wouldn't care that much about that. Because I think I would rather lose my impacts and inspire and be obscured from all of the shooting by touching the forest. I'd just much rather be in the forest. So he goes hold Ballista and he charges into the flank. Now, like I said, I don't know if it was within 18. If it was, I would have gone for the shots into marksman clones, because these attacks are pretty meh. See how he did 2 hits? So those force-grown drones heal a lot, and it's just not very much damage. You know, like, it adds up a little bit. They take a little, and they're going to take some Aura of Death. So there's certainly some value from those Ballistae swings, but I don't know if it's as much as like just getting rid of a marksman stand. Marksmen get no saves against them, so you're on 2s. You got your 12 shots, 13 shots, or I guess 10 shots. So you're close to killing a stand just outright. It's close. So he rolls this charge, I guess it was probably a 5, it looked like. So he comes up short, which is a bummer. So this is the reason that you wanted to charge the front here. If he charges the front, then those guys come further forward. If those come further forward, then the Hellbringer can come back in and beat up the Brute Drones really hard and be in the forest. And that's and he was directly on that line where he could have chosen either side. The shields from the Forest-Grown Drones are not a huge value. So I think he just... A big misplay here was choosing the wrong side for his Hold Warriors. He also isn't getting charged in the front then. Or he is getting charged in the front then. And the attacks will be uninspired and no impacts, and he likely doesn't die, and then he actually gets his... He actually gets all of his rules. I get... Choosing the flank charge there, that's definitely a blunder. That sacrificed a unit for no real gain. Could have gone for the front there. Sorry, Bryan. So Hellbringer going for the move here. Accidentally expanded the Fireforged tray. Tabletop simulator things. Hellbringer moves up. I think he's going to try and shoot. Oh, he just double marched. He was unable to get good shots on. See, I'm not that Hellbringer. Just you can't afford to lose those actions. That's really the problem I'm seeing here. Oh, okay. We put a couple of shots into the drone block, which, okay. They're drones. They take damage. It's fine. That's their job. So, Tempered Sorcerer. Pretty sure he's checking the 18 inches into those marksman clones right now to see if he can seep into classed. And I'm not sure if he can. It's close. I think he might be. I wish I could see the measurements. It looks like he has it into the Strix, but he doesn't have it into the marksman clones. So I'm not really sure what his plan is here. None of the Brute Drones have gone. One Strix stand is annoying. I would try to remove that Strix stand from the table if possible. I don't know if that Strix stand is with an 18. If it's not, then I think you just drop the seep and I don't know, probably like just try to blow up the big unit and do like 3 damage. Oh, he fails seep there, so that's pretty rough. And here's another example, like he's gonna lose a spell cast here. Because he doesn't have his Magma Hold Ballistae alive. They might have still died to the charge clash in the front, but they're much less likely to have. The odds say that they don't die. And it's just... This is how, like, one little mistake, like, normally going into the flank is good. But in this case, going into the flank is really detrimental to Bryan, because he would have a free charge on those Pheromancer Brute Drones with his Ironclad. Like, yeah, he'd go charging into the forest, but he's got a pretty good chance of killing him anyway, because it's an Ironclad, and it's a pretty good tanky beast. And if he survived, then we would still have an erupting forest, which would have allowed for a Pyroclast there into those same Brute Drones to make it a little easier for the Ironclad to kill him, even though Seep failed, so he couldn't finish off the Strix. And it's just, you really have to, like, think about all of the cascading effects that come out of your, like, every little choice. Because, you know, you see a charge and you're like, flank charging things is good. Fireforged. What's he doing with these? Oh, this is not where these Fireforged want to go. I don't remember where he places these. So placing Fireforged into a bunch of brute drones and that have 2 forests for cover on a flank you've already lost, don't put them on the right side here. They need to get up on this hill and bunker up. Maybe they can go behind this Ironclad. The only other thing I could see is using the... You know what I'd probably do here? I would likely use the reinforcement line and come in from the far right, out of line of sight of the brute drones, because Dweg's reinforcement line isn't hurt. Using the back of the front Hellbringer as the reinforcement line. Come in from the side and just shoot those brute drones. They've already moved up this turn. If you can take aim volley them the next turn, you have a decent shot of breaking them. And they can't charge you. That lets your Fireforged actually be semi-threatening the right side zone, which will split some of Karl's attention. These Fireforged don't really have a good place to be in this game, so I think that's probably the best thing to do with them here. In their current position, like, what are they going to do? Shoot brute drones once and then get charged and then lose the fight to regen? Even if they shoot them twice, then, like, they just get charged by the other brute drones and lose the fight to regen. Regen's very, very good against Dweghom. So Karl regens the Strix, and then he just double marches sideways. Just keeps playing cagey with these Strix. They're going to block a charge at some point when it's really important to do so. And that is going to create a Sag for Bryan. So we talked about this, and I was confused why he didn't just charge in. And the reason he doesn't just charge in is marksman clones shoot him. I think you still just charge him in. You just charge into terrain so that marksman clones shoot you worse. Because you're in a situation where you're gonna die. And you kind of just need him to, like, roll bad. But you really need to be getting as much damage as you can, as quickly as you can. And you need to stop the scoring. Like, you have to stop the bleeding. So you charge in, you lose your charge bonuses, but you gain the benefit of the forest. You're touching the zone, so he's not going to score this turn. And you're going to only be down a couple of points. And you hope to win priority the next turn, charge with initiates, and hopefully, like, beat up a lot of forest-grown drones. And then go with Ironclad second and march charge into marksman clones and just hope they die. Because that's kind of your only, like, out in this situation. You're going to eat around a shooting, and then you're going to hope to clear off enough of them with the initiates. Going for the charge clash with initiates here was probably a mistake this turn, actually. I think I would have gone for the march charge. Because the march charge enables him to go for the duel at the end of the turn. And if he duels at the end of the turn, then, and wins priority on the next turn, he can take out the high clone. Or just, I mean, they're broken. They'll just die. They'll get shattered. And, like, either of those things happening is just really, really big. So, I don't like the playing passive with the Ironclad here. I understand the logic, but I think, like, you rely on the fact that you are going to be obscured, and you just kind of, like, shrug and hope that the marksman clones, like, don't roll out of their heads. Like, it's 16 shot or 15 shots Yeah, 15 shots. They're hitting on 3s. Like, it's 7 hits. It doesn't kill you. It's 7.5 hits. It's not going to kill you. Even if you're saving on 2s, you're going to take like 6. Like, it sucks. That's assuming a lethargy goes off before their activation, which it almost certainly will. Like, it sucks, but you just have to rely on the terrain to give yourself the opportunity for your initiates to go in and, like, create space for it. You likely don't die in 2 volleys if you're in cover. And I think that's just what you have to be going for. And one of the things about the Underspires list is its turn takes a little bit to get going. So priority is, if you win priority against it, you can get ahead of all the buffs, right? Like, you go with your initiates before they get Tenacious up. You go with your Hellbringer before they get Lethargy up. And that's really the way you have to play into this list to try to get through it. Otherwise, you're going to get ground down. It's 2,000 points, and it's going to heal probably 200 or 300 points over the course of the game. It's going to heal like 40-point stands a few times. And see, here Karl did what I usually do with Onslaught drones, which is zoom them up the side and then get them into a zone pretty quickly. And then, like, the next turn they'll regen while moving up. And then the turn after that, they'll probably regen, or they'll burn out charge, and then they kind of alternate charging and regenning. So Brute drones are being a little cautious here. There's a Hellbringer there. They don't love that. They can't really just, like, march charge the Hellbringer or the Fireforged to kill them. Part of the reason I like double Hellbringer together and pushing them harder up the side is those Fireforged can come in from the flank and use that reinforcement line because it's not breakable. One of the rules that Dweghom have access to that is often underutilized, but is very good in this scenario. So that the Fireforged can walk in, clear a Hellbringer, or that plus the other Hellbringer can clear one of the Hellbringers. And then you can continue, like, pushing forward, and you can actually, like, turn a flank effectively with regiments that have enough range and enough speed, and they don't lose that much on the turns they don't shoot because of the way their tokens acquire, and because the character on top is still going to go Blasty McBlasterton. And that is a technical term. It's written, it's on page bleep of the rulebook. See, now he's considering using this reinforcement line to threaten with the Hold Warriors on the other side. And I don't think there's any value in doing that. Like, obviously the Fireforged on this side are going to eventually get up and take that zone as he continues to push up that far flank. But I think the Warriors should probably just stay on the far left flank and continue on that game plan. But had he done this play with the Fireforged that are in the center on the previous turn and just done a chunk of damage to those Brute drones, I would have felt much better about his, like, board position. Because those Fireforged could have gone already. They could have just double shot into those Brute drones, and they would have been able to get into effective range and shoot, and then take aim and volley from effective range again. And it's a lot of dice, man. Like, Brute drones save on 1s against that. See, so the Marksman clones take aim and volley. And they did 8 wounds. Right? Like, that's more hits than they should do if he was in cover. That's why I would have just charged in with the Hellbringer last turn. I would have march charged with the Initiates, and I would have charged in with the and I, like, charge clash with the Hellbringer. And I would have just gotten into that unit. Because the Marksman clones don't have good targeting then, right? Like, what are they going to do? Shoot at the obscured Hellbringer or shoot at Initiates? They don't want to do either of those things. See, now the Brute drones are getting up to protect the zone, and this is big for them. Because those Initiates are not in that combat. They're not in the zone. They're not holding it. Bryan's not winning the game right now, and that's really a big deal. Like, victory points are how you win. If you get ahead on them, like, the other player gets desperate and they start having to push things off. And the more, as Dweg, the more that you can force people to come to you, the more you get to take aim. And basically every time you take aim as Dweg, you should just be, like, pouring a small glass of champagne. Because you should be expecting to always hit on 2s and be marching and volleying just as much as you can. And then sometimes you get to take aim and volley, and you're just like, yay, free hits! And it's just extremely strong. It should feel, like, exceptionally good every time that happens. Now, I'm pretty sure Bryan is going to make the play here with the Hellbringer that I was sort of talking about earlier, where you just, he's just zooming after these marksman clones. He's going for the threatened marksman clones plan. And this is really good, because if those brute drones charge that Hellbringer, Bryan can Fireforge them and, like, double spell them and probably kill them. But this Ironclad, I can't help but feel like this Ironclad was kind of done dirty by my boy. Oh man, and high clone hits with 5 out of 6. That's so rude. I'm not really sure what they're talking about here. Maybe they're counting up the sheer number of attacks. I don't know. Well, oh, whatever. So because this Ironclad took so much from shooting, he's very sad right now. He's having a tough time. And he just took 4 more on the save, it looks like. And then the Force Grown drones do a bunch of stabbing. They hit exactly average, which is always fun. And the Ironclad failed half of those, which is also exactly average. And I believe he dies from this. Yeah, and this is just another example. Like, there are a bunch of times that those Ballista, like, didn't hold up that Force Grown block in the correct way. And I think that just really, because I mean, if the Ballista charged in the front and the Brute drones had charged in and killed the Ironclad, or like, and the Ironclad had killed the Brute drones, and then the Force Growns did the same thing into the Ironclad, then they're sitting there with their flank turned to initiates and a Hellbringer. And I mean, I know Hellbringer doesn't seem like a melee thing, but it's actually pretty good at it. It's not ideal, but it's better than shooting at things with Disperse. So, yeah, I think charging, I'm sure it was on a 5, which means you're a little bit more than 50% to make it. And, like, that's pretty good. But I'm not sure it's good enough. Maybe double marching to, like, an inch in front of them would have been better. Because then if you double march to an inch in front of them, then you're still in the zone, you prevent him from getting into the zone, and you're still creating a situation where the Force Grown drones can't really do anything other than charge you. Or they might not even be able to charge you if you threw Hellbringer into them, or Ironclad into them, or if your Ballista are still alive. And then, in that case, you create a situation where you get to charge them without eating the Aura of Death, which is also pretty great. But obviously, every time you make that charge, it feels good. Though I'm not actually sure it would have been that good here. It would have made it safer for the Ironclad to go in. But I think the Ironclad just really needed to go in. It needed to be in that forest, because it just took so much damage from shooting. Like, obviously way more than it should have, but it really needed to be in that forest. Gotta mitigate the chances that something happens. So Hellbringer goes in for the March charge here, and I love this play. One of the earlier games that these two were playing, I asked, like, I was like, well, the correct play here, I think neither of you see. And it was Hellbringer, it wasn't this matchup, but it was Spires into Dweghom, and it was a Hellbringer charging into VCI in the flank. And it would have cleared off his own. And I really like that they've started playing that better. You gotta remember, like, you can use those, you can use your tools. So here's the thing, right? Like, these brute drones getting into the initiates here, like, this shouldn't happen. Not in a way where the brute zones are in the zone. I think the big mistake here was Bryan just, like, obviously it worked out very poorly that the marksman clones just shot the Ironclad off the board. That shouldn't have happened. But I do think Bryan misplayed the positioning over the center zone, and let Karl gain some pretty significant advantage about, like, those force-grown drones and those brute drones are exactly where Karl wants them to be and not where Bryan wants them to be. And even his, like, Pheromancer brute drones are not where Bryan wanted them to be. And he had the choice of putting those where he wanted them to be when he, like, charged in the Ballistae. And I think those types of things are very easily missed. Sorry, a little bit of con crud from LVO. Yeah, it doesn't even quite finish off the brute drones. I think there's like 8. I think he does about 8 wounds. He should come pretty close to killing them. Depends on kind of how the Raegh rolls, but the Hellbringer will be able to finish those off. The Initiate's going there is a little sad because you kind of like to be able to go with Fireforged, like Reform, Shoot, Hellbringer, Take Aim, Volley, Blast, blow the spell them. Fireforged. Does he charge here? I think he charges here. I mean, the charge isn't terrible, but I don't really know why. Like, I wouldn't charge. I would shoot, even though the shooting seems bad. It's not that bad because it's gonna be it's like 7 shots. I would just shoot and march forward. Mostly because then Karl would have to charge to form up to me, because I'd be in the way. I'd march to an inch away and I'd shoot him. And then Karl would have to, the Force-Grown block would have to charge the Fireforged and be turning the way it doesn't want to turn, or else it wouldn't be able to get past them. The biggest problem with that block is it's gigantic, so it can't really reform. It actually pretty much has to wheel. So if you get in the way of it, it kind of just gets stuck. So he charges some brute drones in over here, does some damage to some warriors. Hellbringer he reveals Pheromancer. He decides to use his next card, which are brute drones. And he's going to try to get them up in a place where they can charge Fireforged, probably on the following turn. I don't think he goes for the March charge here, because he should have enough movement to get into Lethargy range. Oh, no, he does go for the March charge. Alright, fair enough. Get a couple of impacts, hopefully get the Fireforged down. in order to kill them off so that he can be free to move on the following turn. It's certainly sensible. I don't know if it's super worth it. I probably would have just double marched. I'd rather be in a better position, and I'd rather be in a better position with my brute drones than with my giant block of force drones, because they're already kind of doing their job. Hellbringer, I presume he's just going to take aim volley here. Yeah. Put all 16 shots in. And this should kill off these brute drones, but I think it doesn't. Yeah, 7 hits. I guess they have about 7 wounds left, so he probably makes one. Okay. They had 8 wounds left, so hilarious. So 3 shots from the guy on top, and Karl, of course, makes all of his saves. So that's pretty good. Pretty good saving for Karl there to survive that. It wasn't like unreasonable though, right? Like he should take like 8.5, and he took 7 instead of 8. Like it could definitely happen. So a buff goes out on some brute drones. I don't really know what it was. Fireforged are going to move up to shoot some brute drones. This is probably a mistake. I think he could have seen the brutes from where he was, or at the very least, like reformed very slightly and just shot to kill off the brute drones in front of the initiates. I believe Bryan actually mentioned that as a mistake almost immediately after it happened. Okay, so he's going back. Maybe he does actually fix that play. Maybe this was the thing he didn't want to do, and it was just like, I should have just killed it with the spell later. Because, I mean, what's he going to do with the spell off of his Hellbringer here? Yeah, okay, so yeah, this kills it off. Oh yeah, this is a problem because he lets himself get march charged by those brute drones, and then like loses the zone to it. And this is why like failing the Seep earlier in the game sucked, because now these Strix are back at full power because regen's a good rule. And I think they're just gonna go like harass a Hellbringer. Or set up to? I don't know what they're doing. Karl's being really cagey with him, and I don't think there's a good reason to be. He always plays very defensively with his Strix, especially in this matchup, because they give Bryan a lot of fits. So I think these two have kind of developed this game where Karl really likes keeping his Strix alive, and Bryan really likes killing them. And I throw my Strix away as the sacrificial pawns they were meant to be. Like in that case, I would have charged Strix into Initiates to keep them off the zone, because that's how you win the game. Actually, I might not have, because I don't think the Tempered Sorcerers have gone. So, yeah, maybe this is correct. They might be within 10 of the Initiates, so he's still in a situation where he can charge them. Okay, so he goes for Seep Pyroclast into those Brute Drones. I'm okay with that play. I don't think the Marksman clones were in range for a Seep Pyro, which makes that kind of the only play, which makes me happier with it. I'm not sure what happened there. I think he cast a second Pyroclast into the Brute Drones, which isn't legal because he's engaged with the Marksman clones, unless I'm misremembering the rule. I believe you still can only target things you're engaged with, even if they're in erupting terrain. I think it only ignores half of it. Either way, you definitely want to blast Marksman clones. Getting rid of more of those Marksman clones and freeing up your Hellbringer to like go rampaging around the back lines is better than doing more damage to those Brute Drones right now. I understand that the plan is probably... Yeah, so these Brute Drones are just going to go for the March Charge into the flank. And I think this is why Bryan was frustrated earlier. Yeah, I don't know. I think the plan on those Fireforged should have just been have all three of them in the zone, on the back edge of the zone, facing forward, because they're going to get charged by Brute Drones eventually, in order to, and then, like, use one of the Pyroclasts to kill off the last remaining Brute Drone in front of Initiates, not care about the Pheromancer's Brute Drone unit, and then try to kill that and Marksman clones, and then try to turn. Because your only real way to win this is to get victory points, and I don't see it happening here. Yeah, Fireforged feel very reasonable when they're defense 3. So, like, if you lethargy them, they feel very fair. Without lethargy, that resolve 4 feels really good. Yeah, so they're not dead, which is really important because that Fireforge can just be one of the last activations that Bryan does on the next turn, and, like, they might die. I'm not sure if that stand is within 8 inches for token usage. I think it is, because Bryan has 0 tokens. My guess is he used them to keep as many Fireforged alive as he could. And yeah, now they're going to build stacks on 6. So Karl just scored both the exterior zones, and like that's pretty rough. Those Fireforged really couldn't afford to let that happen. So at this point, it's looking pretty grim, right? There's not a lot of scoring in Maelstrom, and this Force-Grown Drone block has been able to be where it wanted to be this entire game. And there were opportunities to prevent that from happening, but if you don't prevent that from happening, it gets pretty bad pretty fast. Okay. So the Fireforged go, they take a bunch of Aura of Death. I wouldn't be activating the Aura of Death Fireforged here. I don't know why they're going. Oh no, they were shooting. Okay. I was really confused. This should have been a reform shoot, because he's going to get charged to the flank, and it is much better to lose a third of your hits than it is to get charged in the flank by Brute Drones, especially because they have regen. I wouldn't have activated either fire. I would have probably activated that Fireforged early, specifically for the reform, not for the shots. Your plan is going to be, you have to let them hit you, and then you hope to survive that, and then you have one of your Hellbringers, you have your Hellbringer hopefully kill off the other Marksman clones, and then you drop double spells into those Brute Drones to win that flank. Initiates go, they go for this charge. Tabletop simulator stuff. We're just gonna fast forward a little bit here. I know some interesting things occur. There we go. We're in the right position. So this is why the Strix are where they are. Their plan was to like countercharge Initiates in the flank, which is fine. It's a fine plan. Initiates charge into the flank here. They do pretty well. Like, these are obviously good attacks. Karl makes 12 out of 13, resolves on 6s, and then Indomitable's the one failure. Yeah, so these Brute Drones just get to heal 4 of the damage, and then flank charge. And really, these Fireforged are just very sad about their lives right now. Them going first, allowing for a reform shoot, would have, like, they really should have just reform shot. Because, like, the reform shot is 16 shots on 2s, so it's like 5 hits, so it does like 4 damage instead of doing like 6 or 7 damage, which doesn't really change anything, because he probably still gets a stand back. And you take so much more damage this way, right? Like, he's re-rolling his resolves, and he has 1 less defense. And he takes so much less if he's fighting, if those Brute Drones are coming from the front. And then his Warlord Drake can go Seep, and the other Drake can go Inspire Clash and hopefully kill off the Marksman clones. If not, then it's like, then Clash kills off the Marksman clones, and it should have hit them last turn. Let's see, that's what happens here, right? Those Marksman clones get beat up by the Hellbringer. That means you'd be able to double spell into the Brute Drones, break them, take the left zone and the middle zone, and be like on a path to like getting back in this game. Because this game is actually winnable for Dweg if he hadn't given up the left zone last turn and had given and like wins the left zone this turn. But neither of those things happen because those Fireforged those Fireforged on the left side were just slightly misplayed ultimately. And if this Fireforge and those warriors were swapped so that the Fireforge had shot those Brute Drones, you know, like, we're in a more reasonable situation as well. Hold warriors, clashing, doing a little bit of damage. This is actually a really good game because there are a lot of like small positioning errors that happen throughout it, but almost all of the small mistakes kind of compound upon each other. And frankly, like, Bryan just made more of them. He misdeployed in a couple of places, and he went for kind of a greedy charge with the Initiates, and I think he misplayed the Ironclad. But, you know, he's a really smart guy, and he learns a lot from his games, and he didn't make these mistakes against me. So Hellbringer going for the charge here. I get it. I mean, it's a reasonable, it's a respectable charge. It's just going to actually do more work into Force-Grown Drones in the flank than the shots are. So it's a strong play. Just a little bit more damage. Just keep chunking whatever damage you can into Force-Grown Drones. They do die, but it takes a concerted effort, right? Like, you have to put work into them. I probably wouldn't have gone with the Hellbringer charge there. I would really be... I think that the initiates into the flank of the Force-Grown drones should beat the Force-Grown drones. So my plan for that Hellbringer Drake would be kill off those remaining brute drones. So I would have just reformed and shot and just dumped all my bullets. And then tried to dump all my magic. Because if I can kill that Pheromancer and those brute drones, then that's like one more scoring entity that's down. And that's only after, like, the other things happen. Like, this Fireforged mistake is kind of, like, at that point, there's not much you can come back from. So there's a lot of discussion here about, like, whether or not it's better to just, like, eruption them. And ultimately, probably not. Like, I think you can set it up so it's, like, 6 hits, but it's probably just 6 hits versus 6 hits, so... Maybe 6 hits is better. Yeah. They don't have enough stands in the terrain for it to really be worth it. So we're gonna... There we go. We're gonna move forward until some dice get rolled. I'm pretty sure he ends up just going with this one and just pyroclasting some Strix. Yeah. So the Strix break, take a bunch of damage. He takes some damage from Lethal Demise. So normally I like charging with my Hellbringers more than I probably should. But in this case, he had an opportunity to, like, just reform and shoot those brute drones. And if he did, like, 2 wounds, he breaks them. And then he could Sorcerer to try to, like, get that last one. And that could have just been a really, really big change. Because if you kill that Pheromancer, it's good news for you. You want to kill the Pheromancer. You just got to get everything you can off the board. But also it starts forcing the Force Grunts to actually reroll resolves because that's the Warlord. You get 2 victory points for the Warlord. Like, there's a lot of value to just the reform shoot play in that case. So, you know, Brute Drones. So I think it's the cripple fight against Hold Warriors. Oh no, it's against Fireforged. 2 crippled units just kind of bashing each other. In this case, it was Brute Drones that weren't engaged versus Fireforged who are barely alive. The Fireforged eventually do have to activate, which is unfortunate for them, and they are going to die to some Aura of Death. And then the Tempered Sorcerer is going to go ahead and cast a spell, and cast Seep, and he tries to finish off the Strix. Again, I have to look that up, actually. I'm not entirely sure that is legal when you're engaged. It might be, though. The wording on arcing from erupting terrain is questionable, and I don't actually have the rules on me at the moment, which, you know, makes me feel like I'm a bad YouTuber. Karl's just going for a reform here. He had given them +1 March earlier in the turn, so that they would be able to move 2 spaces instead of 1 space during the reform action. So that they could actually kind of get in like this. So I don't believe he attacked. I believe he just rallied and reformed here. Oh, no, I guess he does. I guess he does clash. Oh, I'm sure he uses the character to reform or to rally. Trying to get whatever damage you can on the Hellbringer, which is smart. You would definitely, that thing is the thing you want to kill. Oh, he did always inspired. From the Pheromancy, which is Induce a Vigor, I believe. No, I don't remember. I don't remember the nouns. Sorry, guys. Like I said, I'm sick and exhausted from LVO, so I have I'm a little bit off on the names here. Remind me of the name of the Pheromancy that targets that gives you always inspired and removes broken in the comments below. So yeah, now you can really see like this is in a pretty rough space for Bryan, and like I don't think that Hellbringer needed to be engaged here. I don't think that it was worth it to kill a stand or two. I really feel like those brute drones could be dead right now with that Pheromancer, and the brute drones on the other side could be in a like fight where neither one does really much to each other with Fireforged, because defense 4 R4 against Clash 2 Flurry. Like, yeah, I mean, the Fireforged will die eventually, but probably not before the two Hellbringers turn around and smoke the brutes. And then if Bryan's able to do that and he can claim those two zones for the rest of the game, he can win this game, right? He needed to not lose the left zone the last 2 turns, and then be able to claim the middle and left zone for the last like 6 turns, the last 5-ish turns, and then he can win this. But he fell behind too much on victory points here. So they're currently planning stacks. I'm not entirely sure. Bryan might be realizing that like it's not really possible to come back on VPs here. So this might be the discussion that goes to a concession. I believe we play out this turn, and it's pretty fast though, because the Fireforged are going to die to those brute drones. So Pheromancer goes. He probably does. What he's doing? Oh yeah, he buffed the Fireforged, lowered the Initiates, or he buffed the Fourth Grin drones, lowered the Initiates' defense with Lethargy. The Hellbringer took some Aura of Death, which another reason why you didn't want the Hellbringer in that fight until it was going to kill something. Like, you only want it in there if it's actually killing them. It does a little bit of damage, but it's in the front, so it's like, eh. Wound gets through here. Character gets through, does like 2 hits. Resolve 2, takes 1. Or defense 2, resolve 5. But brute drones go. I think he should regen the one against warriors. Yeah, he regens that stand back. And then, like, probably kills off some warriors. And then there's just really nothing left. Yeah, Bryan just removes the warriors. Like, yeah, they're gonna die. Even though it's only like 7 hits. It actually might not have killed him. Like, but it's the writing's on the wall here, and also that fight doesn't matter. It hasn't mattered for multiple turns. All it's doing is keeping brute drones distracted. So Raegh duels, then oh, that was pretty rough. So Bryan takes like 9 off of this, and like that sucks, but it's really not super important with what's happening here. Like the Forest Groans are broken. Um, that cost Bryan 4 attacks off of like 4 no cleave attacks, which is, you know, it's not nothing, but it's not that exciting. So then there's 8 hits from the Raegh, which just go straight through. And yeah. So, I believe they shatter here. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of saves to make. Oh, nope, they don't shatter. So I think they might. I think they were actually supposed to shatter. It's weird. The rules on broken, like broken to shatter. I guess it is from the time you're broken. I think he was missing a stand from when the duel happened. Because yeah, he should have gone with Raegh to duel. It should have gone like Raegh initiates, then Hellbringer, so that Hellbringer could be trying to finish them off. Actually, I probably would have gone Raegh initiates, Sorcerer, and then Hellbringer, because I really just want to like kill them before. But it's immaterial because there were just like zones were lost here. So that's pretty much the end of the game. Bryan calls it here. He's just like, yeah, I don't know. There's nothing I can do. You're too far ahead on points, and you have too much of the board. It's not like this is an unwinnable game from an attrition perspective for the Dweg army, but it is unwinnable from a victory points perspective. And I think that like the main mistakes of this game were not fighting over the points well enough. It's something that we talk about a lot, is that zones are really important, and you don't want to fight over them. You don't want to throw things away to score victory points, but you do always want to be fighting over zones. If you're fighting over empty battlefield, you're probably making a mistake. That's because if there's a fight that's happening and it's not over victory points, then you better be winning it, because you don't want to be in that fight unless it's very, very advantageous for you. The only time you want to be in close fights is when it's over victory points. Overall, I'd say Karl played this game really, really well. I didn't really notice any major positional errors that he made, and I feel like he played a really, really clean game. His Strix were a little bit too close on at the beginning of the game, so they got Hellbringered because he mismeasured. Because he didn't, he was within 5 inches of the forest that Bryan was able to walk into to get erupting. That sucks. You lose a unit of Strix. It's frustrating. But honestly, that was his only thing that was like really out of position. And I think Bryan just like misplayed his Hellbringers and his Fireforged this game. The one on the left side would have been good, but it should have been supported by the other one instead of them going kind of in this middle area. Or those Fireforged should have gone on the far right and been like a threat from that side instead of just kind of nothing. And then I would have been pushing my Hellbringers up the side further and faster, because the only thing coming in are Brute Drones, and when the only thing that's coming in are Brute Drones, then your Fireforged coming in from the board edge and shooting Brute Drones is very fun. That's good for the Fireforged. And then you just keeping both Drakes kind of together. Like, part of the fun of Magma is that you can put out a Seep over here, and then both Drakes can shoot from anywhere on the world. But that's what the Ballistae are for. So And I don't remember if Herald Meg was on the Fire Warrior or the Hold Warriors in this list. I'll have to check the list when I post it into the video description later. But that's another like tool that you can use to expand their range. But generally, you want them near each other because anything that wants to like tie them up should get blown off of them for such a transgression. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all next week, where I review the game where Jeff shoots me off the board with slingers and smashes my face with Chosen of Conquest. We'll see how that one turns out. Am I able to outscore him? We'll never know. Until Monday.